that we've talked about policy innovation and what governments can do to set the enabling conditions. And we've talked a little bit more broadly about climate finance, where it comes from and how it can be used and what are the possibilities. We want to drill down a little bit and talk about what the financial sector, the private sector, is actually doing, and what big financial entities like central banks are doing to help the movement towards climate finance. And just to start off, let's say that things are becoming better because there's a huge amount of growth in what we could call sustainability finance. We talked about the 500 billion that are now moving into climate finance a year, which is very promising. The growth of green bonds over time has become over $150 billion a year. That means there's an appetite of investors who want their money to be used for sustainability purposes, like stabilizing the climate or offsetting CO2 emissions, or investing in energy efficiency or public transportation or renewables. There's a lot of investor sentiment there. But what can the big entities also do to promote that, to move the private sector in that direction? There's a couple of really interesting initiatives. One is called the Greening of Financial Systems, the Network for Greening Financial Systems. It's an initiative by the Central Bank of France, the UK Bank of England, and the People's Bank of China, among others. These are all central banks that regulate money flows. They make monetary policy. And it's very interesting that they're looking at climate as being relevant to financial stability. What it means is countries are looking at the climate as being very central to monetary policy. That's a nudge towards banks. And banks and investors, meanwhile, are already ramping up. The green bonds is one, the growth of the green bonds. And there's one or two other initiatives which are really fascinating. In fact, next week at the UN General Assembly, Secretary General Antonio Guterres will be launching, with over 46 banks representing more than 100 members and $46 trillion in assets, the principles for responsible banking. Principles for responsible banking. That means not investing in those kinds of activities that may cause pollution or may cause the climate to degrade further. There's also a movement called portfolio decarbonization. That means getting your CO2 risks and liabilities out of your portfolio. And the UNEP Finance Initiative, among others, is promoting these activities to actually clean and green finance. And I have to say that the financial sector is really stepping up to it. Here in Geneva, where we're based, there's a movement for financial sustainability, a center for financial sustainability. There's a network of financial centers for sustainability, which includes Singapore, Frankfurt, London. So across the world, we're seeing a lot more sentiment and awareness about how money is being invested. And this will go a long way towards shifting those investments, that 20% of GDP that we talked about, the $200 trillion of assets that we talked about, towards investments that will enhance and stabilize our climate and our environment into the future. So markets are being shaped by initiatives like the central banks of France and the UK coming together. Markets are perceiving new opportunities, so investors are perceiving opportunities. And a lot of these reflect sentiments arising from consumers who are aware, citizens who are aware, and this is creating new market opportunities. So the climate challenge, let's use a positive word, the climate challenge is actually opening up a lot of opportunities. And this is drawing investment. So just a few examples from the sharing economy, for example, where you have firms that are developing overnight practically with market capitalizations which vastly outstrip traditional industries in hotels, housing, also in e-mobility, electric cars, and even in things as simple as food. Organics is now a segment of the food industry which is more than $100 billion a year, organic food. And these are huge opportunities, and I think the investment community as well sees these as opportunities to invest and make a good return, because more and more people are waking up to the reality that they want their lifestyles to be congruent with a world where the climate is stable and the environment is good. So the opportunities for meeting needs in a way that are good for the environment, good for the climate, are there. They need innovation, they need entrepreneurial spirit, and it's happening. That's the good news.